Welcome back, Science 10. This is the 2.6, the nitrogen cycle from the CD4 booklet. So it's another cycle that you need to look at for Science 10. The nitrogen cycle, so as you can see, life depends upon the cycling of nitrogen. Nitrogen atoms are required so that cells can make proteins. Nitrogen is also required for the synthesis of DNA, the hereditary material found in all living things. So we take in nitrogen. It's a very important thing for plants as well as you. So it's important to take a look at how it is cycled through the environment. So the movement of nitrogen, of course, is called the nitrogen cycle. And the interesting thing is that you may think that air is mostly oxygen, but it actually is mostly nitrogen gas. N2, 79% of the Earth's atmosphere is actually nitrogen gas. So the textbook here alludes to the fact that, well, if there's so much nitrogen, the cycling of nitrogen shouldn't be a problem. But the problem with that is that nitrogen gas is a very stable molecule and reacts only under limited conditions. So in order to be in a usable form, it has to be in the form of the nitrate ion. And we talked a bit about ions in Cr2, and nitrate was one of the ions we looked at. So it's one nitrogen, three oxygens combined together, and in total that molecule has gained one electron to become the nitrate ion. So nitrogen gas needs to be converted to nitrate, NO3 minus, to be useful. So this looks at how that in fact happens. So there's two ways in which it happens. One is by lightning, and the other is by nitrogen fixing bacteria. So you can think of nitrogen fixing, we're fixing the nitrogen gas to make it into a usable form. Okay, so first of all, nitrogen fixing by lightning. I kind of wrote this little schematic here, which you should likely copy down. So we have nitrogen gas in the air. It gets hit by lightning. It breaks apart the nitrogen molecule, and nitrogen combines with some of the oxygen to make NO3 negative. So basically that's what happens in a nutshell. The energy from the lightning causes the nitrogen gas to react with oxygen, producing nitrates. And then those nitrates become dissolved in rain or surface water, enter the soil, and then plants can take it up. So when we're talking about nitrate here, nitrate is one of the things that is in fertilizer. So if you go to a grocery store or farm supply store and buy fertilizer, nitrate is one of the nutrients that is used in fertilizer. So plants, of course, take that, use that, and are able to grow. Okay. If we look at when a plant is consumed by animals, the animal breaks down the plant proteins into amino acids and then uses that to make proteins it needs. So it's basically food for a plant. They take that and convert nitrates into amino acids, which they make protein, and basically that's how they grow. So nitrogen fixing by lightning. The other way here, you can see here, we have nitrogen fixing bacteria, which make nitrates. Plants take that in, the animals eat that, the animals die, or animals excrete their waste, that makes ammonia, and then nitrogen fixing bacteria take that and make it back into nitrate. So the next one is by bacteria, fixing nitrogen by bacteria. So some bacteria are capable of fixing nitrogen. These bacteria provide the vast majority of nitrates found in ecosystems. They are found mostly in soil. Nitrogen fixing bacteria can be found in small lumps or nodules of legume plants such as clovers, soybeans, peas, and alfalfa, so they attach themselves to plants. The bacteria provide the plant with a built-in supply of that fertilizer, that nitrogen, while the plant gives the nitrogen fixing bacteria sugars they need to make nitrogen, so nitrates. So they basically complement each other. The bacteria provide plants with nitrates, and the plant provides the bacteria with sugars that they need to exist. The plant-bacteria combination usually makes more nitrate than the plant or bacteria needs. Therefore, the rest just simply goes in the soil, making nitrogen for other plants. So crops like this contain nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which make more nitrates or more fertilizer than the plant needs, so it's replenished back into the soil, which is a good thing when you plant these kinds of crops. The traditional agricultural practice, including legumes and crops rotation and mixed planting, capitalize on nitrogen fixation. So often farmers in the past would rotate their crops, going from an expensive wheat crop, which sucks up a lot of the nitrates from the soil, and then the following year plant one of these crops in which it's replenished. So it's a cheaper way of replenishing fertilizer into the ground. Nitrogen and decomposers. All organisms produce waste and eventually die. When they do, a series of decomposers break down nitrogen-containing chemicals in the waste of body into simpler chemicals called ammonia. So that's where we have this. So farmers often put ammonia directly on their crops, or of course it's found in manure or death and decomposition. And you can see the nitrogen-fixing bacteria convert that ammonia into nitrates, which is usable by the plant. Other bacteria convert ammonia into nitrates, and still others convert nitrites into nitrates. These bacteria require oxygen to function. The nitrates then continue in the cycle and go into nitrates. So that's a key thing there, require oxygen. And of course, farmers and gardeners who use manure and decaying matter take advantage of the nitrogen cycle because they're purposely putting ammonia back into the soil, which gets converted into nitrates. Okay? So those processes are ways in which you can make the usable nitrates that plants take in, of course, and grow. Denitrification is kind of the opposite, or I like to call the backward cycle. Nitrates are converted into nitrites and then converted into the stable nitrogen gas, which goes up into the atmosphere. So at various stages in the decaying process, bacteria can break down nitrates into nitrites and then into nitrogen gas. Eventually it's released back in the atmosphere, and this process is called denitrification, so the opposite. And of course, this may happen if there's too many nitrates in the soil. It's replaced back, and it ensures a balance among nitrates, nitrites, and nitrogen. So older lawns often have many denitrifying bacteria, and these denitrifying bacteria require no oxygen, so they work best in an environment in which there is little oxygen. And of course, in the springtime, you may have got someone to come over and aerate your lawn by poking holes in it, and what that does is it provides areas for oxygen to enter. And if you have oxygen, these bacteria can't exist. What will exist are these fixation bacteria, which will make your grass grow better. So what we have happening there is aerating the lawns forces oxygen to enter, and these nitrogen denitrification bacteria can't exist. Nitrates will then remain in the soil where they can be drawn in by grass roots and used to make proteins. So if you look at plants are green because they contain chlorophyll, and of course plants need nitrate in order to make chlorophyll. So you can take a look at a lawn, and if it looks kind of like this reddish brown color, that may mean that it has a lot of denitrification bacteria, and it may need to be aerated to get some of the nitrogen fixing bacteria in there. Also, another case in which we have a lot of denitrification is if the soil is acidic. Nitrogen fixing bacteria cannot exist, or if it's waterlogged. So if it's waterlogged, that also means the oxygen content is low, so swampy areas would have that happen. So I have the little note here, aerating forces oxygen into your lawn. This causes nitrogen fixing bacteria to exist. Okay, we're going to skip the phosphorus cycle and just simply go to here. Basically, we're talking about nitrates. Nitrogens are nutrients that are essential to living things. It talks about here that warm, moist soil, and if we have many decomposers, it cycles quickly, such as in the tropical rainforest. In grasslands, it's slower, and of course in the Arctic, the nitrogen cycle would be even slower still. Temperature and oxygen levels are two of the most important abiotic factors when regulating decomposition, so things breaking down to make ammonia, and then from there, nitrates. Right, the questions I'd like you to do. Explain why nitrogen is important. Number 2, if nearly 79% of the atmosphere is nitrogen, how could there be a shortage of nitrogen in some soils? So we've talked about that. How do animals obtain usable nitrogen? 4, nitrogen-fixing bacteria are found in the roots of bean plants. Explain how the bacteria benefit from the plant. and how the plant benefits from the bacteria. So we talked about that. Number 6, explain why it's a good practice to aerate lawns. 9, explain why bogs and swamps are usually low in nitrogen. So we talked about all those, folks. And then lastly, 13, with each grain harvest, nitrogen is removed from the field. Farmers have traditionally rotated crops. They plant in each field a crop that is wheat gives you a lot of money, but it sucks up a lot of nitrates from the ground. So we may follow with a legume crop, which replaces and they support nitrogen-fixing bacteria. What advantages are gained from planting wheat year after year after year? I just gave you a hint about 30 seconds ago. And then B, new strains of crops have been especially bred to take up, so suck up, high levels of nitrogen from the soil. These strains produce more grain, which means more money for the farmer, but what are some long-term disadvantages that these crops could have if they suck up so much nitrogen from the soil? Okay, so that was the nitrogen cycle, section 2.6. So finish off those questions and get them in. See you again.